When Mark flopped down beside me in the chair one evening, I knew something had happened. Mark, as many of you will remember, is the fellow who works the switchboard on night shifts for Cashmere Medical. He's about my age, also going to college, and most days it seems like he's just trying to make it through another year so that he can take one more step towards his bachelor's degree. Mark's pursuing a BA in systems analysis and network security, the kind of thing that could easily get him a transition into the IT department of the hospital. The IT guys would love to have him too, but Mark's still got 2 more years before he can even think about leaving the switchboard. Tonight, however, he looks like he might be thinking about throwing in the towel early. I swear, I don't know how much more of this I can take. I hit save on the document I'd been working on and turned to give him my full attention. Mark was pretty steadfast, and when he started making statements like that, it was best to take it seriously. What's up? It's been a bad night, all on its own. 2 drunks, a domestic that turned into a battery that I had to transfer to the police, 2 doctors that have called to yell at me for not being able to reach their lazy employees, and the calls from 3 North are getting more frequent. Ah, yes, the mysterious calls from 3 North's guest phone. The calls have been going on for as long as I've been working here, and they preceded one of Mark's crazier stories. Last year, his sister had been in a terrible incident involving the groundskeeper of a sleepaway camp she was staying at. The guy who had snatched her had turned out to be a real sadist, and she could have very easily been one of his many victims, if a mysterious phone call hadn't come in to warn him in the wee hours of the night. That was how the police had finally caught the guy, and Mark had been listening a little closer for weirdness after that. That was probably why he had been catching so many more of the calls from 3 North. 3 North had started its life as a maternity floor. It had been built specifically for OBGYN, but when the larger space on the 2nd floor had become available, it had been turned into a long-stay unit. This is where more than one patient was sent to either die or get better, and a lot of them ended up just dying. There were a lot of weird stories about 3 North, but this was the one that I heard about the most, since Mark and I were friends. Not a night went by that he didn't get at least one weird call from the guest phone up there, and it seemed that these numbers were on the rise. Has it changed any? No, it just says I love my baby Jackie, and then hangs up. The problem is, sometimes it's once a night, sometimes it's once an hour, but lately, it's gotten a lot worse. He sat back in the rolly chair, picking up a cup as he filled it with coffee from the thermos on my desk. I wanted to sarcastically tell him to help himself, but I felt like maybe he needed something to settle him a little. It wouldn't be so bad, but after Miss Mary retired last month, we got a new supervisor. Mr. Gorbitz is really riding my ass about call volume, and apparently I'm missing calls because this number is calling so often. It's driving my call volume way down, and I don't know what to do about it. They're calling that much? I asked skeptically. Tonight alone, they've been calling every 5 minutes. Last night it was every 10. Why not just hang up on them? I suggested. If I hang up on them, they call back, and the volume usually increases. Sometimes I don't even get a chance to get out of the call before they've called again. If I hang up too much, the guy on the other end starts to sound really rattled too. A couple of nights ago I was just hanging up on them as soon as I got them, but eventually something opened the call on my computer and he screamed his usual message into my ear. Scared the hell out of me. Spilled my coffee all over myself. After that, I've been letting him say his piece. It's getting to be too much, and I don't know how to make it stop. I listened, I commiserated, but I knew there wasn't a lot I could do about it. I did, however, decide it might be worth a little bit of investigation. Who knows, it might be something nice for my book in the end. I started by talking to some of the OB nurses who had been working on the 3rd floor when it was still active. Most of them had different stories. Stories about voices from empty rooms. Stories about weird feelings of being watched when you went into certain corridors. But none of them had ever heard of someone making weird phone calls on the 3rd floor. The phrase didn't seem to mean anything to them either. Not until I got to Nurse Robinson. Nurse Robinson was a 35-year vet who refused to retire. She shook her head at my questions right up until I told her what the caller had been saying. She'd heard the stories, everyone had, but this was clearly the first time she had heard this part of it. The message was something only the switchboard operators really knew about, and it seemed to spark a memory. It couldn't be. It's so long ago. Why would he still be hanging around? I asked who she was talking about, and she seemed more than happy to fill me in. Carter Mason. His wife gave birth on the 3rd floor about 20 years ago. That was a bad year, and it was honestly one of the arguments for moving to the 2nd floor. I must have looked confused because she elaborated. The 2nd floor had been equipped with the new security doors, and Mr. Mason was part of our argument to management. Jacqueline Mason came onto the wing in the early part of 2001, I guess, and Carter was insistent that he stay by her side. He seemed like a nice man, always attentive to what she needed. I guess she disagreed, because pretty soon we were told that he wasn't allowed on the ward. Jacqueline had made accusations of abuse, but the police didn't seem to be able to find any evidence that what she was saying was true, not enough to keep him in jail. So while he wasn't allowed on the wing, Mr. Mason came to the phone in the lobby to call her several times a day. I sat right there at my desk and listened to him beg his wife to tell the truth. He wanted to see his daughter. He wanted to see his wife, but she wouldn't budge. It would later come out after the fact that she had been cheating on him, and there was some questions of the child's paternity. Mr. Mason wouldn't hear any of that, though. He was convinced that the baby was his. And he often told her how he loved his baby, Jackie. He deteriorated pretty quickly, climbing into a bottle and just never getting out. He never got violent, never mistreated staff, but I've seen him stumble in drunk and call her on the phone before security could make it up to escort him out, at least. The doors opened then, and she looked up as a husband pushed his wife and baby out in a wheelchair, a nurse keeping a little distance between them as she carried her bag. Even after she finally left, Mr. Mason still stumbled up to 3 North and tried to call her. He called random rooms begging to see his baby, and after a while, he would call 4 or 5 rooms just to tell the residents how he loved his baby before hanging up and calling another. We couldn't do much except call security and try to get him to leave before he disturbed too many residents. Sometimes he would come in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, but only once did he stumble up here after dark, and that was the last time. She closed her eyes as if remembering it made her a little queasy, but decided to press on. I came into work one morning and they had the area around the guest phones corded off with police tape. Carpet was stained for weeks, and maintenance was finally forced to cut the section out and replace it. He had stumbled in around 1, somehow making it past the front desk, and when the switchboard wouldn't transfer him to any of the rooms after hours, he called them one last time and told them exactly what they'd been hearing all these years, that he loved his baby, Jackie. Then he killed himself right here at the phone banks. They wheeled him from the 3rd floor straight to the morgue, but it appeared he left a little something behind when he was gone. I thanked her for her story, but it made me wonder why he decided to stay. So many spirits seemed to be tied to this place, and few of them had happy endings. What was it about this place that led people to trap themselves here, I wondered. Was it the nature of a hospital, a location often hanging between the material and the hereafter? Maybe some kind of darkness that hung about the place. Either way, my book was picking up quite a few tales like this, and it all felt related somehow or another. When Mark came by a few nights later, both of us having some time off in the interim, he looked tired. It was clear that he had spent his off time obsessing over the calls, and the trouble he would be in if he didn't get his call volume up. He listened intently to my story, but I could tell it wasn't really what he was looking for. "I'm glad you've discovered another story for your book," Mark said a little snappishly, "but it still doesn't help me fix my call volume. I need to get them to stop calling." "Are the calls still coming in every few minutes?" I asked. "Yeah. In fact, I asked Roger if he would just leave his computer signed in so I could mute his mic and answer the weird calls with his computer. Sure, I'll hear about it tomorrow, but if they want a call volume, then they'll get it when I don't have to answer one on my phone." I looked up as the thunder rumbled from outside, watching the lightning dance behind the glass of the lobby doors. "Have you asked Carl to look into it? Are you sure it isn't just kids playing pranks or something?" Mark rolled his eyes. "If this is kids, then they're committed, and they've been playing this game since they were toddlers. I've had him go up there before, but he never finds anything. He never leaves his office these days anyway. He's watching old security tapes, trying to find something to lead him to that guy in the red scrubs." That surprised me. I knew I hadn't seen Carl in a couple of weeks, other than the incident with the Scarecrow men that had happened a few weeks ago. But I just figured he was working on an audit or something. It seemed I'd been right, though the audit was self-imposed. I needed to check in on him more often, but I'd been a little preoccupied as of late. "Well, what if I went up there and had a look when I get my break later?" Mark thought about it, nodding as he considered. "That could work. They call so frequently that you could probably see if anything's happening with the phone." I looked at the board by the wall and saw that 3 North was currently closed due to lack of residents, something that happened from time to time, and it would be unoccupied till Monday. I told Mark I would call him when I went on break, and he went back to the switchboard a little less stressed. It was the most I could do for him, really. The problem was outside my ability to fix, but not beyond other forces, it seemed. It was 1:30 before a very disheveled Carl came to give me a break. He looked a mess, unshaven and stained, and I wondered if he had gone home much in the past few weeks. I didn't think he had, but he didn't seem to want to talk about it. He told me to take my break, but not to take too long. "I found a new lead, and I really want to see where it goes." I told him I'd hurry, and after buying a sandwich from the vending machine in the break room, I made my way up to the 3rd floor. 3 South was still bustling despite the time, but 3 North was shadowy and quiet. The corridor was lit only by the emergency lights, and the doors were open and yawning like waiting mouths. I wondered what I would do if I heard the mysterious voices you so often heard about in this place, and I supposed that Carl would have to watch my desk for the rest of the night. Few people came back after hearing those voices, and I kept my eyes on the prize as I made for the phones by the nurse's station. Mark picked up on the 3rd ring, telling me I had excellent timing. "He just called a few minutes ago, and they've been coming in every few minutes since I got back." As the bank of phones came into view, I saw all 3 sitting placidly in their cradles. They weren't pay phones, but they looked similar. They would ring into the switchboard when you picked them up, so the operator could connect you to your desired room, if it was within visiting hours, that was. The little screens on them were lit up, but as I got closer, I could see that the one on the end was calling out. That was weird, since it was securely in the cradle, and I assumed this must be where all the trouble was coming from. The thunder rumbled outside, shaking the building a little as I came shakily towards the phone. There was no outward sign of anything weird. The phone wasn't floating or anything, and there was no ethereal voice from around the phone. But it was still strange that the phone was making a call at all. The lights flickered a little as the lightning struck again, and I could hear the storm beginning to rage outside. It wasn't rare to get rain at the end of winter, but this kind of intensity was a little unnerving. This felt more like a particularly loud summer rainstorm, and as my hands settled around the handset, I felt a shock from the metal arc over my fingers. I picked up the receiver before I could lose my nerve and set it to my ear. hearing the static on the other end as it fought against the woof, 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 woof of the fan in Mark's office. "Hello?" I half whispered, waiting to hear something. Instead of coming from the phone, the words seemed to slide into my ear like a rotten eel. "I love my baby, Jackie." At that moment, the biggest lightning strike yet hit outside, and the emergency lights went out as I was left in complete darkness with the phone pressed against my ear. There was a smell suddenly, a smell of burnt plastic and old gears, and the phone in my hand became very hot. I let it drop, swinging on its metal umbilicus to bump against the wall, and as the lights came back on, I had a brief flash of a crazed figure as he bent at the waist to grab the receiver. The hunched figure looked absolutely insane as it noticed me, and when the lights dispelled it, I was left breathing hard in the middle of the hall, sitting on the scratchy carpet in the hallway of 3 North. The storm lasted well into the next day, but the benefits were a little more immediate. Mark reported that the calls had stopped. The board had been shaky when it came back up, the lightning having knocked the servers out for a few minutes, and it took an hour of listening to the concerned internal calls before he realized that he hadn't heard the strange call in that whole time. The strange calls hadn't come back the next night either, and David solved that mystery for us the night after that. He and I were talking when Mark came to give me the news, and he told us that the whole bank of phones on 3 North had been fried when the lightning struck. They were old anyway, and it's a wonder they didn't go before now. Management sees no reason to fix them, so I guess they'll just go by the wayside. Mark has since reported that the phone calls come in every now and again from different phones in the hospital, but it's back to being once or twice a month as opposed to every day. So, if you use the courtesy phones at Cashmere Medical, be careful to check that it isn't in use. You never know when a certain spirit might be trying to reach out to his baby. It appears I'm getting quite a reputation around here. Someone came up to my desk today, someone I'd never seen before, with a very strange story. You're the guy who's writing the book about the hospital, right? The one they talk about. I'd been working on a list for the previous day's on-call personnel, trying to get it ready for whoever was going to be working tomorrow, and I looked up to find a woman in scrubs standing beside my desk. She looked terrified, her hands clutching the shoulders of her scrub top. She looked oddly put together to be trying to hold herself together, and I realized that something must have happened recently. This place is like a snake sometimes. It strikes without warning. I am. Did you have something you wanted to tell me? I said, offering her a chair. She sat, looking around as if she expected to be attacked by someone at any minute. I don't know. Carl and David told me that you were collecting stories, and David said it helped to talk about the weirdness sometimes. I'm just hoping for some perspective and maybe some advice. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I told her to have a seat for a few minutes while I finished up, and as I typed, she slowly drew her legs against her chest. Whatever she had seen had really affected her, and she kept jerking her head to look behind her like someone was going to creep up on her. She was terrified, clearly out of her element, and whatever it was, it spooked her. I hit send on the list a few minutes later, opening up a notepad as I prepared to dictate. Okay, tell me all about it. She nodded, peeking at me through her knees and looking very young for a woman that was probably older than I was. It happened so quickly, but it felt like it ran in slow motion. Do you know how sometimes things get fuzzier the farther it gets from when they happened? This isn't like that. I can remember it perfectly, like a photograph in my head. She put her forehead against her knees, and the chair creaked a little as she shivered. It started when I got to work. I've been a nurse for right around 10 years. I started on the 3rd floor, but I found that I liked helping out in the OR, so I transferred to the surgical department and have loved it ever since. I've had several doctors ask for me to help circulate their cases, and as such, I usually find myself with a lot of overtime at the end of the month. I was coming in for one such time, called in to help with an emergency procedure, when the trouble started. I got to work about 20 minutes after they called. It was the middle of the afternoon, so I was still awake and just kind of enjoying my weekend. I pulled on some scrubs and drove in, and when I got there, I noticed that no one was in the change-out room. That seemed odd. Surely they wouldn't have started without me. And as I opened my locker, I was in for another surprise. Someone had taken my coat. It was just a regular white scrub coat, the kind with lots of pockets and patches, but it also had my spare name tag on it. I looked around to see if maybe I'd sent it to laundry by mistake, but it was nowhere to be found. I wasn't terribly worried. I must have just forgotten that I took it home, and I scrubbed up and got ready for the case. I wondered why they had started without me, and reflected that it wasn't the only time the scrub team had acted weird lately. I was friends outside of work with more than one of them, but they had stopped inviting me to things as of late. I had thought maybe they were busy at first, but over time, I realized they were just going out without me. I asked them about it, wondering why they were acting so distant, and they told me it was me who was acting weird. They said they saw me in the hallways sometimes, and I would refuse to talk to them. They would see me in the halls or in the elevator, but I would pretend not to know them or ignore them altogether. I told them I had no clue what they were talking about, but I don't think they believed me. I realized I'd been wool gathering as I stood at the sink, and I finished scrubbing out so I could get to work. There was no one in the hall getting things together, and I wondered how big of an emergency this had been. They had said emergency, but it just sounded like a car accident. The patient was conscious and really just needed some foreign objects removed so the wounds could be closed. It wasn't a code blue situation, and I couldn't believe they would start without everyone being there. I walked down the hall to room 2, and that's when I saw them. They were all standing around the table, Dr. Carter moving about as the nurses handed him things or helped him with the removal of what appeared to be pieces of wooden fence. He was saying something to the woman on his left, and as she reached for the tray beside her, I realized they had started without me. I was offended before I did a head count and realized they had a full team in the room. There were 7 of them, all people I knew, and at the right hand of the doctor was a woman wearing a familiar white coat with a very familiar silver name badge. She turned when he said her name, nodding as she reached for something beside her, and that's when I realized that I knew her too. She was me. She looked like me, at least as much of her as I could see, and from the eyes to the hairline, she was a dead ringer. She moved a little stiffly, her turns looking mechanical, but other than that, she was me. She never looked my way. There was no sinister crinkling of eyes shared between us, or a creepy smile seen from the corners of her mask, but the longer I looked at her, the worse I began to feel. The feeling is hard to describe, but the closest I can approximate is a feeling of vertigo. I felt dizzy, my vision shaking a little as I looked at my double. There was a pressure in my eyes, something like a change in altitude, and I just knew that if I were to go and talk to her or touch her, something terrible would happen. She was me, just as I was me, and we were not supposed to occupy the same place at the same time. I didn't know what else to do, so I just left. I walked until I left the OR and came out into the lobby. That's when I saw you and realized you must be the one that David had talked about when he said you collected stories. So here I am, unsure of whether I need to go back and confront the other me or not. I finished typing, the woman looking at me as if expecting something. I didn't know what exactly to give her, but I knew who would. I called Carl and told him there was someone in the OR impersonating a nurse. He came pretty quickly then, and when he saw the woman sitting at my desk, he called her Carol and pulled up a chair to see what was wrong. The two had known each other for a while, it seemed, and when she told Carl about the missing jacket and the imposter in the OR, he told her to come with him so they could ID the perpetrator. "I'll make sure you're safe before I apprehend them, but I may need you to ID them so I can have something to tell the police." The two left, Carl and Carol thanking me for my help, but that wasn't quite the end of the story. I saw a few off-duty security guards coming in about 30 minutes later. No sooner had they wandered in than Carl had called me and told me to announce a lockdown. "Tell them the doors are closed until further notice. No one comes in or out unless cleared by security." He had a security team member at every exit, even a couple of blue and whites from the Cashmere Police Department, and they checked those coming in and going out as Carl had some of the other guys search the hospital. The lockdown wasn't lifted till after visiting hours were over, and that was when I got the rest of the story. Carl looked tired as he flopped into the seat beside me, the same one Carol had occupied earlier in the day. He looked tired, clearly doing a lot more legwork than he was used to, and I turned my YouTube video down as I asked if everything was okay. "Yeah, but Carol's pretty shaken up about it. We had someone take her home and check her house, but I don't think she'll be back to work for a little while." "So what actually happened?" I asked, opening the same documents so I could make some notes. Carl looked around like he was afraid someone might see him. It's pretty bizarre for this place," I said, eliciting a laugh from Carl. True. Okay, so after we left, Carl and Carol had gone down to the OR so Carl could ID the imposter. When they got there, the OR was in a bit of an uproar. Dr. Carter saw Carol and asked where she had gone and how she had left without anyone noticing. "We were worried about you. One minute you were there, and then the next minute you were gone." Carol said that she hadn't been here, that hadn't been her, that it was a stranger, but Dr. Carter had only shrugged. "She looked just like you, down to the Disney masks you always wear and the scent of your deodorant." Carl asked if she'd sounded like Carol, but no one seemed to be able to remember if the woman had spoken or not. People had spoken to her. Some of them were sure that she had answered, but they couldn't remember a single interaction with her. She'd been passing instruments, had been passing more sutures at the time when Dr. Carter had turned and found she was gone. No one saw her leave, but she must have. People don't just disappear. Carl had called in backup and they had locked the hospital down and searched it from top to bottom. He had one of his officers check the cameras too, but no one could find the woman leaving the OR area. It was like she had walked into the OR at 7:15 and never walked out again. It wasn't the strangest thing I had ever heard, but it was definitely up there. The weirdest part was where we found her coat. Weirder than a disappearing person? Well, we took Carol back to her locker before we locked down the facility to see if we could find any evidence of a break-in, but when she opened the locker, the coat was right there, like it had never left. Carol looked at it like she couldn't believe it, and when she kinda sat down, I sent her home. They searched her house for anyone who might have gotten in, but it was clean too. It's the damnedest thing. I believe that she saw what she saw, but to find that coat right there in the locker, I just don't know. He went back to it not long after, and I was left to ponder what it had all meant. The hospital has always been a strange place, but between jumping ghosts and tapping in the morgue and the strange stairwells, the weirdness has escalated beyond anything I've ever heard of. The activity is growing, and I wonder how long it will be before the everyday visitors to the hospital begin to take notice as well. I swear to God, you can see it for yourself if you don't believe me. I looked up from my pancakes to see that Matt was wearing his dead serious look. All of us were sitting at the Taste of Cashmere, a diner that sat across the street from the hospital, and Matt was talking about his latest run-in with weirdness. Me, Matt, David, and Carl had taken to eating there some mornings, especially if the night had been particularly bad, and the food was well worth the price. Carl nodded sagely, chewing his eggs before saying, "I told you, she jumps every night at 3:18. I've watched her do it a dozen times or more, but none of you believed me." Wasn't so much that none of us believed Carl when he told us about the jumping girl. It was more that he had told us so often, we no longer cared. Cashmere had so many weird things going on that one more was just icing on the cake. "I never said I didn't believe you," Matt said. I didn't know it was like that." Matt had come to talk to me after it happened, and the story had been grisly. Matt had been on a break, walking down the South Promenade, the newer part of the hospital, to get coffee. Now, there was a cafeteria on the north end, where we worked, but he claimed that the coffee they brewed on the South Promenade canteen was better by a mile. Matt often made the trip when he had enough quarters to feed the fancy machine they'd set up over there, and today he was in quarters. He'd gotten his coffee and was on his way back when he had to cross the big entryway that looked up onto the other balconies that fronted on the other floors. This was the first thing most guests saw when they came to the front doors, and some people had called it the ballroom because of the large glass chandelier and the polished tile floor. To me, it always looked like the reception area of a fancy hotel, with the desk and the elevators and the glass balconies sitting behind it. It was about 3:15 when Matt started making his way back towards the switchboard, and he just so happened to be crossing the ballroom at 3:18. He just so happened to be looking up at the balconies as he crossed the ballroom, and that was the only reason he had seen her at all. Something caught my eye, and when I looked up, she was perched on the railing of the 5th floor. Her feet were bare, her white legs kicking out over empty air as she looked down at me. I started to call to her to ask her what she was doing, but when she pushed off the rail and began to freefall, she screamed. Her cries shook the chandelier, and when she hit the floor, I dropped my coffee and started backpedaling. I couldn't believe it. She'd hit the ground and popped like an overripe melon, and her blood had splattered across the tiles as she hit. I stopped backing up when I hit the wall, and as I stood there hyperventilating, she turned her head and gurgled wetly at me. I think she might have said "Mama," but I can't be sure. I closed my eyes, trying to get control of myself so I could call it in, but when I opened them, the only thing spilled on the tile was my coffee. She was gone. She was nowhere to be seen, and I just stood there and stared at my spilled coffee for about 5 minutes. When my legs finally decided to work again, I came to tell you, he said, nodding at me. The coffee cup in his hand had shook a little as he spoke, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Watching Barbara Flatsby tumble to the polished floor of the South Promenade would have been enough to make anyone spill their coffee. Barbara Flatsby, if the stories were to be believed, was one of the newer ghosts to take up residence in Cashmere Hospital. The South Promenade had been up for less than a year when she had thrown herself from the 5th floor balcony and landed hard enough to crack 5 of the tiles in the pristine entryway. She was a single mother, also newly single. Her boyfriend had left her after he'd heard the news of her pregnancy, and she had tragically lost her baby in childbirth. Truth be told, the stories claimed that it had likely been dead for days, and Barbara was in denial. There were OB nurses who swore they had taken part in the delivery, and the baby had been cold and unresponsive from the first exposed extremity. Barbara had been unwilling to hear this, and had insisted on cradling the baby as she lay sobbing in her hospital bed. After the nurses had insisted that the baby had to be disposed of, the corpse beginning to fall apart under her care, Barbara had become something akin to catatonic. She'd been unresponsive for nearly a week, her room changing from the OB floor to the short-stay unit within days of the birth. Her parents came to see her, her friends came to see her, but she would not respond to any of them. She mostly sat in her misery. That was until she had gotten up at 3 a.m. one morning and decided to fling herself off the 5th floor balcony. Her death had been classified as the actions of a heartbroken mother, and there was even a plaque erected in the lobby in her memory. The plaque, however, was hardly necessary. Barbara repeated her show every night at 3:18 for whoever just happened to be in the lobby. All kinds of staff had claimed to have seen her, but they say it was something you didn't quite believe until you saw it for yourself. "It's pretty awful," said David, munching his hash browns and giving a little shudder. "Wait," I asked, "do you mean all of you have seen this girl?" "Yup," David said. "Couple of times," said Carl. "Once too many so far," Matt said. As I ate, I felt a little left out. Everyone else had seen this ghost girl except for me. If I was going to add her to my book, something I was pretty sure I was going to do, I needed to experience it for myself. As we ate, I made a decision to go on one of my days off, to see the phenomenon for myself. My next day off was Thursday, so Friday morning I got up at about 1:30 and made my way to the hospital. I avoided the desk, not wanting to field any questions from Clint as to why I was here on my night off, and made my way to the South Promenade. I could take a seat in the lobby and observe her as she fell from the railing. That would give me a great means of explaining it in my book, but as I came to the entrance area, I was in for a disappointment. The floor gleamed wetly with fresh polish, and the ropes hung across it read, "Closed to the public." I could still have seen the fall from beyond the ropes, but I moved around towards the elevator, looking for a better vantage point, and I had a better idea. Why not go up to the 5th floor and watch the start of her fall? I wondered if it would work as I took the elevator up. Barbara fell from the balcony every night at about 3:18. Surely my presence wouldn't be enough to stop her. She had fallen with people standing in the lobby. I had to believe that she would fall with me sitting up there, too. It was the act of falling that was important, and she probably wouldn't even acknowledge me. She was a spirit with a predetermined destination, and I doubted she'd be stopped by someone as mundane as me. It was 3 o'clock when I took a seat behind the railing, and I sat making notes on my phone as I waited. I was excited. It was a little spooky. I felt proud of myself for doing actual field work. I also felt a little silly as I waited up here for something I didn't actually think would happen. My head was swirling with different emotions as time ticked by. The jumping girl was a big part of hospital history, even if it was one of the newer parts. It would be a travesty not to include it, but as I typed up some simple entries, I felt sure I'd be disappointed. This would be the one night she wouldn't show, and I would have to rely on first-hand accounts to detail the experience. Things like this didn't just happen on set schedules, and no amount of waiting would make it so. Sitting here was like waiting for a particularly scary roller coaster, and I hoped that the experience would live up to the hype. "Are you waiting for someone?" I glanced up, startled out of my contemplation, and there she was. She was sitting on the rail, her legs dangling out into open space. Her hospital gown was long and green, her blonde hair spilling down the back of it, just above her buttocks. She looked so incredibly young. None of the stories ever mentioned her age, and I could believe she was a high school girl or someone's kid sister. She started forward, looking down to the scene of her death, and I became aware that I could see the chain for the chandelier through her if I concentrated hard enough. Seeing her here was like catching Santa Claus putting presents under the tree. You believe he's real, but you're still so surprised to actually see him. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" I I wet my lips as I tried to make words. I suppose I was waiting for you. For me? She asked, her eyes turning merry as she looked back over her shoulder at me. Why would you be waiting for me? Even as she asked, her eyes turned down to the lobby below, the place she would always wind up when it all came down to it. I guess I just wanted to know. I paused, trying to think of something to ask her. Why do you come back here every night? She looked back over her shoulder a final time, and her answer seemed so obvious. Why, the view. It's so pretty. I seem to be drawn to it. Her eyes turned down to the tiles, and I thought for sure she would jump now. Looking at the clock on my phone, however, I saw that it was only 3:15. 3 minutes to go. I remember coming up here before Anthony was born. I walked up the stairs, trying to get him to come out, and when I reached the top, I looked over the rail and saw the floor below. The patterns, the way the light hits it. It's like a dream. I think I came up here so I could see Anthony again. Like maybe he'd be waiting for me down there in those tiles and lights. 3:16. 2 minutes left. I wanted to show him those lights and those tiles so badly, but now he'll never see them. He's gone beyond them, beyond me, and I'll never get to hold my baby boy and show him there's beauty in the world. 3:17. 1 minute and counting. I got up and took a step towards her, wanting to stop her. I wanted to pull her back. I wanted to show her that there could be life after her son, but I was too late for that. She'd jump either way, would have jumped 5 years ago, no matter what I did, and the realization stopped me. I was stuck, trapped about 5 feet from her, and about 5 years too late to help her. That's when she pushed off from the railing. I thought she might simply fly away for a moment. Her gown fluttered behind her, her hair bouncing in the sudden breeze, before she fell like a stone and went screaming all the way down. I ran to the rail, but it was too late. I was saved from the show that Matt had witnessed and found only an empty lobby below. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it all. The lights and the tiles twinkled merrily, and I had to admit she was right. It was a very pretty view. As I headed for the elevator that would take me back to my car, I knew she would continue to return here, again and again and again. Cashmere Hospital traps its flies, both living and dead, and if we're lucky, it only lets us die once. If we aren't, well, come to the South Promenade lobby at 3:18 if you want to see how that goes. Sometimes it's better to be dead than in whatever hell has trapped poor Barbara. Hello? No, I haven't seen anyone leaving. Male, black hair, brown eyes, 5'9", probably in a hospital gown. I got it. I'll pass it along to Carl, thanks. Hey, what room did you say they were in? 301, of course. I got you. I hung up and rubbed the bridge of my nose. That was the third patient this year that had disappeared out of room 301, and it was only June. Well, that wasn't quite true, I reminded myself, as I dialed Carl and passed along the description. This was the 50th person who had disappeared from that room in the history of Cashmere Medical Center. That may not seem like a lot, considering how old the hospital is, but when you consider that it's from a single room, then you have to put it together that something is a little off. Room 301 on 3 North, yeah, that 3 North, has been disappearing patients for as long as anyone can remember. 3 North was the first wing on that floor, so it's the oldest and the most storied. Voices, specters, disappearances, and strange happenings are pretty common up there, and this is just another piece of the weird pie. It's a piece that draws the police in every now and again, because the people who go missing don't always come back. There are dozens of missing persons cases that start with subject was seen by a nurse in room 301 of Cashmere Medical, and the PR for the hospital is not great. I've talked to some of the nurses about it, especially my expert on Cashmere lore, Nurse Robinson. 301? Of course I've heard of it. I filed more police calls from that room than any other nurse I know. That's great, I blurted, walking it back a little as I saw the look on her face. I mean, not great, but great. You have the information and know what I'm talking about. She smirked. Relax, kid. I know what you meant. So, any idea who the first person to disappear was? No clue. I wasn't here when the place opened. Heck, I wasn't even born when the place opened. I don't think anyone kept records of it back then. Sometimes people just up and leave, you know. Not everyone who disappears around here is from nefarious or supernatural means. Some people just skip out on the bill, medicate and dash, and they probably make up more than a few of the people that have left room 301. It's the ones that couldn't have done it that get me. I remember one of the first patients to disappear on my watch was a little old man with one leg. He had a prosthetic, but I doubt very strongly that he could have left without a lot of help. Why do you think so? I asked, taking notes. The one leg he had was riddled with gangrene, and if he hadn't had it removed, he would have died in short order of blood poisoning. There was the woman on oxygen who left her tank behind, and the lady with 4 kids who never went to sleep before telling each of them good night. There have been some regular folk in there, of course, but some of the ones who go missing just don't make much sense to me. I was still thinking about it as I came downstairs, and I nearly ran into a familiar figure as he walked out of the stairwell. The red-clad orderly had become a little less secretive after the business with Carl, but I think maybe Carl and I were still the only ones who really noticed him. He smiled when he saw me, dipping his bald head and holding the door for me. Well, 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 if it isn't my young friend. Going down? Yeah, I was heading back to relieve Carl, I said, something occurring to me before I could walk fully into the stairwell. Say, you've been coming here for a long, long time, right? The orderly nodded slowly. I suppose it seems long to you. To me, it just seems like another day. Right, but what I mean is that you've been here since before the hospital. Correct. Do you know anything about 301 on the 3rd, but I never got to finish? He sucked in a breath like someone had plunged him into ice water and shuddered all over. That room is not natural. I do not go there. The souls in that room are not for me. That took me aback a little. What do you mean? Aren't all the souls within your domain? It was hard to see unless you had spent some time around him, but the orderly actually appeared paler. That room is outside my jurisdiction. Some people are not of the world that we inhabit, but are worlds controlled by others. That room is one of those rooms. So, who does it belong to? He looked at his watch and told me to walk with him. I'll try to explain it all, but I doubt it will all be conveyed. Do you remember the girl
you helped pass on?
Yeah, the one with the bright future.
Well, there was a girl like that in that room a very long time ago. A girl who felt she had all the time in the world. She was in there for something minor, an appendix that was bothering her, but when she went to sleep one night, she discovered it was far worse than she thought. She woke up to find me waiting for her, telling her it was time to go. She wanted to know where, and when I told her it was her time to go, she said no. We talked about it, but she just kept refusing. Eventually, I left, assuming she would move on by herself, but she did not. That room has become her Desmay, and she guards it jealously.
Her what? I asked, not recognizing the word.
Her Desmay. It's a pocket world that ghosts make sometimes. Room 301 is hers, and sometimes she takes people from it. It's not her fault. She's a very lonely little girl, and she likes to have company. She doesn't realize that the people there are being devoured, so she can continue to exist in that space. She is greedy, she is sad, and she is eternal.
He stopped outside room 317, telling me that this was where he had to leave. The code blue came overhead as I reached the stairs. It looked like the orderly had led another person to the hereafter. I told Carl about it when I went to relieve him so he could get back to work, and he nodded solemnly. I'd figured it was probably something like that. It's always some damn thing around here. You know, I get more calls about that room than anything else here. Don't suppose I can tell them it's a ghost kid, can I? I shook my head. Probably not. Sure would make it easier. They're starting to get suspicious of all the disappearances. It's normal for people to run out on their bill from time to time, but when it's the same room again and again, they start to put the pieces together and decide the hospital has something to hide. It keeps happening. It could lose us our accreditation, and that'd be real bad. He left not long after, needing to speak with the coroner and add his name to the death paperwork, and I settled in to ponder. Michael came in a little later, looking to kill a half an hour on break, and I asked him what he knew about 301. I know there's some weird calls that come from it sometimes. I asked what he meant, and he took a seat in one of my swivel chairs. Well, one night I got a call from a little girl in the middle of the night. She sounded like she might be about 9 or 10, and she was pretty bossy. She told me I needed to come to her tea party because she was missing a fourth, and none of the people there were any fun. I figured it was someone's kid playing games, and when I called the nurse's station, they assured me that there was no one in there. The room was empty at the time, and they said the door was locked because of it. She called back an hour later, asking why I wasn't at the tea party, and when I told her I was working, she hung up on me. Has she ever called back? A few times, usually to invite me to a tea party, but it's always weeks apart. Weirder than that, I got a call from a woman asking for help a few years ago. It was right after the lady with the kids went missing, Susan something or another, and she said this little girl was keeping her from leaving. I asked her how the little girl was stopping her, and she said that the little girl had made the doorway disappear, and every time she tried to escape, it would lead to nothing but a lot of running. Then I heard a little girl ask who she was talking to, and the line went dead. Weird, I said, but Michael shook his head. Nah, weird was what happened a couple of weeks ago. I was working late, and around 11:30, I got a call from the third floor. I figured it was from 309. The lady in there was having trouble getting her husband, but instead, I was treated to a low noise coming from the receiver. It was weird, like a kind of growling that rose and fell the longer I listened to it. I turned the volume up as high as it would go, and that's when I heard it. Screaming. The tortured screams of a whole bunch of people. It was like that recording of the hole in Russia, the one they claim goes straight to hell, except it was like they got softer and louder the longer I listened to them. Finally, I just hung up after a while, but it was hard to shake. I hear it sometimes in my dreams, and I don't like it. He left not long after, saying he thought he might go take in the memorial garden instead, and I felt a little sorry I had asked. Despite this, I asked Gerald the same question when he came to take out the garbage in the lobby. Gerald was coming up in the world these days, working the lobby instead of changing out the rooms, and he seemed happy to be away from the third floor. He sobered a bit when I asked him, some of the smile creeping out of him, and told me that he wouldn't go into that room for anything. The third floor is very haunted, but that room is cursed. Cursed? Yes, people disappear from there all the time, and not just patients like they want you to believe. We've lost 5 members of the custodial team in the time I've been there, but they always get chalked up to job deserters or poor work ethics. I have a suspicion that might have been the room that Maria disappeared from, and it's been getting hungry lately. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine at the words. The hospital may not notice all of them, but I have changed enough rooms to know who is skipping out and who is disappearing. It's getting more frequent, and if it's allowed to continue, then it will soon become noticeable to even the normal people who aren't surrounded by it every day. He left then, and I was left with more to ponder. So that's how I came to be outside room 301, just as the sun came up one morning, pondering whether I actually wanted to go in and investigate or not. I had taken a step towards the door when someone put a hand on my shoulder, and I turned around to find the orderly behind me.
Not yet. Someday maybe, but not today.
From everything I'm hearing, it's getting worse. Something has to be done, I told him, feeling that this was true.
And one day, you may do something, but not today. If you go in there now, you will never come out again. I promise you that. Grow in your power. Learn all that you can. Make some friends who can help you. And then try this one. I believe you would have an easier time with that harpy in the operating room than this one. And she is very angry. Not today. Save this one for another time.
So I left again, deciding he would be the authority in this situation. After all, it wasn't as if the ghost was going anywhere. I knew there was something off about her when she wandered up to me. It had been about a week after the incident with the orderly, and I was just finishing up the write-up on the encounter for my book when I saw her walk out of the stairwell. She was wearing clothes that looked terribly out of date, but remarkably well preserved. Her pants were soft, her blouse robin's egg blue. She was barefoot, one foot covered in a stocking while the other was bare and red-looking. She was disoriented, looking around like someone unused to seeing something so fantastical, and if it hadn't been for her clothes, I might have thought she was some kind of backwoods hick who was on their monthly trip into town. She looked at me, confused as to what I was doing, and when I asked her if I could help her, she asked me what I had done with her desk. Your desk? Yes, I know it looks a little different, but this has to be Cashmere Medical Center. I only stepped out for a break, and I came back to this strange place. She was breathing heavily, her eyes darting around like the walls might fall on her. She was wearing a name tag, and As I glanced down at it, I saw her name was Frances. Ma'am, I don't know what to tell you. I've been manning this desk for the last 2 years. Is there something I can help you with? Someone you might be looking for? Her teeth chattered a little, her eyes still darting around like a scared animal. I don't know. Is Miss Gilbert here? I need to talk to Miss Gilbert. I thought about it, trying to figure out who she might mean. My boss was Mr. Corey, the head of communications, and had been for the last decade as far as I knew. I racked my brain thinking about who she might mean before seeing a sign by the door with the name of our management team on it. Tracy Gilbert, head of human resources, stood out, and I wondered if that might be who she was talking about. Do you mean Miss Gilbert in human resources? I'm afraid she would have gone home by now. She looked confused. Tracy isn't with human resources. She just got promoted to head operator. No, none of this makes any sense. I didn't know what she needed, but about that time, David came around the corner and nearly dropped his ladder. Oh my God, he breathed, putting his hands to his mouth like an old woman. That's Frances Garland. The woman turned when he said her name, but if she recognized David, she never said. That's right. Do you know me? I seem to have gotten turned around somewhere. Can you help me? She took a step toward him, her legs shaking as she swooned. David did drop the ladder this time, and when he caught her, I was already calling the code overhead. The ER responded pretty quickly, thundering up the hall with a crash cart, as they bundled her onto a stretcher and rode her down the hall to the emergency room. David and I watched her go, and I was about to quip that it was just a typical Tuesday when I noticed how flabbergasted he still was. You okay, David? You look like you've seen a ghost. David looked at me as if he wasn't sure whether I were trying to be cute or not. He was shocked when he realized I was serious. Have you seriously never heard of Frances Garland? She has a commemorative plaque in the butterfly garden. I shrugged. Her and about 20 other people. Yeah, but hers was a gift from the hospital. A few of them are, actually. When you go missing on the job suddenly, the admins usually give your family a plaque. It's their way of saying, sorry, the hospital ate your family member. Wait, I said, are you saying that Frances went missing on duty at Cashmere? David nodded. I'm saying this is the first time she's been seen in nearly 50 years. That left me a little speechless, too. Wait, how do you know it's her? He snorted. You're too young to remember it, but in the 80s, they had a commemorative art gallery where the surgical waiting room is now. I remember having to change the bulbs in there about once a week, and I walked past the picture someone did of her so many times I could commit it to memory. It was a good one, too, very lifelike, and that woman is the spitting image of that picture. No, he amended, not the spitting image. That's her. It's even the clothes she was supposed to be wearing when she disappeared. Want to tell me what happened, or are you just going to keep being vague? I asked, crossing my arms as he continued to tell me very little. David took a seat, shaking his head at the fact that I had never heard this before. We're talking about ancient hospital history here. Pretty sure that Frances Garland went missing before Shaky Leg Mary took her first step in the OR. Frances was one of the early mysteries of the hospital, least one of the first ones I was aware of. She disappeared way before I got here, but they were still talking about her when I came along. She was a receptionist, just like you, and she sat at the desk that used to sit here. Back then, reception was only open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and after that, you just had to figure it out for yourself. Can you imagine? I quipped. So, Carl's predecessor, a guy named Nathan, had come by around noon to give her a break. She took her lunch upstairs to eat with a friend of hers, a nurse on 3 North, and said that she'd be back in about half an hour. Nathan took a seat, but after 45 minutes went by and Frances still hadn't returned, Nathan called up to 3 North to see if she had lost track of time. Her friend told the charge nurse that Frances had never shown up, and she'd eaten her lunch and gone back to work about 15 minutes ago. Nathan called and got some relief and started searching the hospital for her, but he never found her. They called her house, they called her family, and the police talked to her friends, but no one ever saw Frances again. She left her purse on the desk, a purse that contained her house keys, as well as her bus pass. Some people said she must have run off with a boyfriend or something, but the people who knew Frances knew that was impossible. Frances wasn't the kind of girl to just up and disappear, and her boyfriend hadn't seen her either. Her bank account remained unused, her apartment was empty, and people began to speculate about what had happened to her. She was never found, and it appears it's a mystery we only now have an answer for. I nodded, suspecting that David would have a pretty good idea of what had happened to Frances. If it could transport people 50 years into the future, I'd say David had gotten off very lucky. David got back to work, but he was far from my only visitor that day. The sun had set by then, and I was just getting my hospitalist list done for the night when Carl came walking up. Carl had been a lot more amiable since the incident with the orderly had ended. He seemed to be sleeping regularly, eating something besides fast food, and thinking about things other than a red-clad man who may or may not be killing people. He hadn't been. He had apologized a few more times afterwards, something I told him he didn't have to do, and he seemed to have decided that he could be forgiven now and stop saying he was sorry. "I understand you found Frances Garland," he said, by way of greeting. "It's more like she found me," I admitted, telling him what had happened. He listened, nodding as he looked back at the offending stairwell door. "Sounds kind of familiar," he said, landing on what I'd already figured. "Yeah, it's what David said too. Have you talked to her?" Carl nodded. "Sure did. Isn't every day a 72-year-old, 23-year-old stumbles out of the stairwell after being missing for almost 50 years. I asked her what had happened, and she told me quite a story. She said she walked into the stairwell with her lunch in the spring of 76 and walked upstairs and stairs and stairs. Then, after some time, she eventually came out. She didn't know how long she'd been in there, but she said it hadn't been longer than a week. She'd eaten her lunch, drank some water in a puddle, eaten some weird mushrooms, and just kind of existed for a while. She said the doors had showed her weird things, strange places, and terrifying creatures, and she was always afraid they would get in and eat her up while she was asleep. Then today, she thinks, a man woke her up and told her she looked lost. He helped her find the right door and told her that she should get back where she belonged." "A man?" I asked, thinking I might know who she was talking about. "Bald guy in red pajamas was what she said," Carl finished with a little wink. I smiled. It appeared he wasn't just good at guiding dead people. "What I don't get," Carl piped in, "is why it took her 47 years to get back. David was gone for 3 days. How did Mrs. Garland go missing for almost 5 decades? I could only shrug. Maybe time works different in there. Maybe it's not her, but a doppelganger like the lady from the OR. Maybe she's a monster, just pretending to be Frances Garland. Who knows, Carl? There's just stuff we don't understand about this place, and we may never understand it." Carl shook his head. "You will, one day. It's your calling, man. You love the mystery of this place. I can see it every time I come in and find you working on your book. I may never find the answers, but you will someday." He left me then, and I was surprised to find that he had left me with a deep feeling of pride. When my relief came in, I found myself stopping in the ER to ask about the woman who had been taken from the reception area earlier that day. "So you were the one that found her," the nurse at the desk said. "Well, she's doing better now. She was dehydrated and extremely anxious. She appears to be very confused. Thinks she's Frances Garland, you know, that old receptionist that went missing all those years ago. It took some doing, but she's resting comfortably now on the 4th floor if you'd like to go visit her." I was tired, but found that I did want a word with the mysterious Frances Garland. I arrived at her room to find her sleeping, but she had a visitor already, it seemed. The woman was known to me. her iron gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her blue eyes looking at the woman without seeming to understand her. She looked up when I came in, and I greeted Mrs. Tracy Gilbert. She nodded at me, pointed to the door, and the two of us stepped into the hallway as she closed it quietly behind her. "Are you the one that found her?" she asked, her tone telling me she already knew. "She came tumbling out of the stairwell, looking lost and confused," I said with a nod. "That tracks. When she went into that hospital stairwell, the walls looked like wood grain. This new design probably looks like something out of a sci-fi movie to her." "So, do you believe it's her then?" I asked, feigning skepticism. She nodded. "I do. Franny and I graduated high school together in '71. She was so happy when I got promoted to head operator, something that's now called head of telecom. I had just gotten promoted when she disappeared, and the second I saw her, I knew it was her. She hasn't changed a bit. She looks the same now as she did when she waved at me in the hallway that morning. I don't know how that's possible, but she's back. It'll take time, but I think she can acclimate to this time." I offered to help if she wanted me to, and Mrs. Gilbert said that she would take all the help she could get. "You're the young man who's writing about the strange things that happen around here, aren't you?" I stifled a chuckle. Did everyone know about the book? "Before you go too deep, remember that she once sat where you sit now. Don't be so casual about the project you're passionate about. You might not make it back, but you might come back to find everyone you knew and loved is dead, and you're left in a world you no longer understand." She went back into Francis's room then, leaving me to chew over that little hard-to-swallow fact.